challenges of women in Pakistan are multi-layered and multi-leveled, starting from social attitudes and patriarchal approaches, which result in lack of education, no access to it, mean no opportunities left to them, married early, burdened with children at young ages. Combined with that is, of course, the violence and threat of violence. And while they do have a vote, but it's often not allowed to be exercised. As you know, that there's a gap between registered women voters of about 11 million. So it's not a small indicator of where women stand. And I think violence is one of the biggest issues that prevents women from coming into their own. Because on the other hand, when given the opportunities, our women are outstanding. Even today, the school results, high school results show that women have bagged all the top, girls have bagged all the top places. Women parliamentarians, women leaders, they always go that extra step to fulfill their responsibility. So we have some very outstanding women, they don't get the opportunities. Well, the mandate of the National Commission extends all over the country. So, but some of the responsibilities, the social sector responsibilities, have been devolved. So, the authority or the responsibility is of the provinces to deal with those issues as they deem best. So, the Commission can raise any issue, promote, do the advocacy at the provincial level, and also initiate laws which have within them amendments in the penal code, because once the penal code is amended, it's applicable to the entire country. So, regardless of whether it's a law, sometimes a law may not extend across the country, but all the penal provisions will go across. So, automatically the law gets extended. But I think the mandate of the Commission is to take up these issues and with the provinces also, and that's what we do. First of all, we should also look at the structure of the Commission. The Commission has representation from all provinces, and then the provincial commissions on the status of women are also its members. So you have an organic link with the province, and I think what I have found most successful is to work through the commissions. Although we don't have commissions everywhere, but we've managed to lobby to get commissions, the law passed in Sindh, for instance, and the one in Balochistan has now been also tabled. And they have taken as much support that we could give and in designing the law also. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the Commission acts as the secretariat for the Inter-Provincial Women Ministers Group, which meets, in the last 3 years that I was there, we met about 3 to 4 times a year, which meant that we took up common issues, we learned from each other. Any positive thing that happened in one province then got picked up by the other province. It turned out to be a very, very good forum of coordination and advocacy and collective work. So that's how we managed to work so far. We are, unlike many other sectors, there's no antagonism between the provinces, provincial women development departments, but especially the provincial commissions. There's mutual support. Actually, SDGs, they were signed, they were adopted in the General Assembly of 2015, and then work started on the indicators. Now, as you know, these goals are very wide and they're interconnected, which was one of the criticisms of the Millennium Development Goals, that they were in silos and it didn't have a rights perspective. So these have, and therefore they do overlap. But SDG 5, as soon as they were made public and governments adopted them, the first initiative was taken by the National Commission to look at SDG 5 and look at the indicators, because indicators were still not finalized, in fact were not finalized for quite some time. and each country had to develop their own indicators. So what we did was, the initiative was of the Commission was to get the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, which is the data focal point, the agency for managing data for SDGs. The PBS had looked at the goals and seen and the suggested the targets, the goals and targets, and had examined their gaps in the data. So we brought them together. We looked at other civil society organizations who'd worked on this. We got UNDP and UN Women and the government, and tried to identify, because we took up the task of formulating gender indicators. So that was the first initiative that we did. We did a whole mapping. We did where the gaps were and what would be the primary indicator, what can be an indicator later. So we did that homework and submitted it to, shared it widely, and then the Planning Commission and UNDP, with UNDP support, is moving on. The task force in the Parliament is also there. So we interact with those, but the primary responsibility now is with the Planning Commission and UNDP, with UNDP support, because UNDP can't take the lead. The lead is ours, and we've been our objective has been, and what we've worked on, is to try and get these indicators that reflect, appropriate indicators to reflect these targets. And we've been to provincial meetings, and I'm also on that. There was an advisory council formed, and I have done written the briefing on integrating women in the mainstream of the Pakistan's economic and other development, reflecting the SDGs. So we've already contributed that far, but the lead is there at the Planning Commission, and I think it needs a little bit more push to internalize the gender indicators. No, the goal 5 tells us what we have to achieve. You see, goal 5 sets the framework. How we do it is our business, and I think that's where we have to focus. And what the Commission has done, for instance, there are certain things. The goal 5, in fact, if you look at it, it matches the Commission's priorities. One priority is violence, the other is economic empowerment, and the third is political participation. So those three things, the voice, the economic independence, and freedom from violence, is what we are seeking, and the goal also underwrites those. And looking at barriers, we do look at reproductive health and violence related to reproductive health as a big barrier. So these they really fit into our own agenda in that sense. And towards that, there were 2 or 3 initiatives that the Commission took. One was to look at, do a status report on women's economic empowerment, almost as a baseline to see where we are in terms of economic empowerment and what we need to do. And it's a report which has looked at economic empowerment not in a narrow sense, but in a wider sense of education and health and employment and other factors, political participation, and has also developed a women's economic empowerment index. According to that index, we've also got now a baseline of economic empowerment down to the district level, and we want to use this to track progress and development, and to be able to point out to the provinces where things are very bad and what you need to do. So I think it's a very, very important tool which will help us in tracking the SDGs. I think I've just done a mapping, at least in one province, of all looking at violence against women and looking at the services that are available, response mechanisms. You'll be surprised, looking at Sindh itself, there are about 50 different services. There are shelters, there are crisis centers, there are police committees, district committees. There are, violence against, child marriage committees. There's a galore, and nothing happens. And I think that's what we are trying to look at. Why is it that these things don't happen? So there are 2 or 3 reasons that I see. One is that governance is very poor, as we all know, in Pakistan. Very good intentions never get down to the grassroots level. Partly there's under-resourcing. The other thing is human resource is not adequate. I mean, you may have a place like the Gender Crime Cell in the federal capital, which is supposed to collect all information on data on violence against women, has a provision of 20 staff members and only has 2. So, you know, it's that kind of, you don't have adequate staff, you don't have adequate resources to carry on activities, and then there are very sort of low levels of accountability mechanisms. I think, and the other thing that I feel is, I mean, these are, you know, governance part of it. The other is that people are not aware of these institutions, or if they are aware, they don't demand. There has to be a demand for these institutions to perform, and it's only when we demand then they will get reactivated. And I've seen it myself, that when you write to a police thana or a DIG or an SP, you get an immediate response, but if you don't write to them, nothing happens. So we have to also, you know, use our rights as citizens to make these institutions work, and so it is our responsibility also. I feel the Commission also has a responsibility to jog these people into work and ask why are they not performing, because this is our responsibility. You see, I wouldn't, I mean, I think culture is used to keep women subjugated. Our culture is never static. It keeps changing. Now let's take an example. For instance, we see very visibly that parents want to educate daughters, and you see that this is a demand. There's no longer they feel that a daughter should not be educated. Now whether that demand of theirs, there's enough or adequate or appropriate supply side is another matter, but the desire is there. Similarly, a girl's earning is no longer seen as something to be embarrassed about. She brings money and incomes in the household, nobody now objects. No, this is a change in culture, and those changes are take place all the time. But I think culture norms where you want to control people are retained and are, you know, imposed. So the fundamental culture of not stopping control of women has not changed. That desire and use of culture to continue with that authority is continuing, and I think this is one of the reasons why we see seems to be an accelerating rate of violence against women, because you let daughters study, you let them work, but you don't want them to exercise any choice. You want to control that, and that's where you see the high rate of violence against women. So it is very, very important to challenge the oppressive norms of culture.